Hello and welcome to English 4 1.2, Summarizing and Outlining. In this lesson, we're going to look at reading an essay and creating a summary of that essay in an effort to understand it better. So a summary is just a brief recitation of what was in the text with elements of an outline. So how we were talking about how you make an outline to write an essay, now we're talking about sort of reverse engineering an essay to see what outline it came from. And here are the steps to do so. We're going to read the original article or passage at least twice. In my example here, I'm going to read it once and then just sort of go back over it a second time, hitting the main points of it. Highlight or underline the main points of the passage, outline the writer's main points, explain to the audience the most important parts of the original article, and put it in your own words, write with complete sentences. You can use direct quotes, but only if necessary. Place an in-text citation for the source at the end of the summary. Okay, so there are 6 pieces of text to read. I'm not going to read all 6 of them. I'm only going to read the first one. This one, text 1. Guide to Continuing Education After High School, Sorting Through the Options, excerpt by Parent Toolkit. Okay, that's not a person's name, that's like a website. So, let me just come over here and add a Google Doc. Because the first thing I want to do is get my citation down. Okay, so my in-text citation is going to say Parent Toolkit, so that anytime I quote from this, the in-text, come on computer, catch up. There it goes. Looks like this. Parent Toolkit. That'll happen inside the text if I need to quote. And then end text citation will look like this. Parent Toolkit. And then that whole title. Guide to Continuing Education After High School, Sorting Through the Options. Guide to Continuing Education after high school. What was the subhead? Sorting through the options. Sorting through the options. And I need quotation marks around that. What do you want me to do? There we go. I'm going to put excerpt just so we are all on the same page. Okay. Now, they didn't give us a year. We would like to have a year after this, but they didn't give us a year. Now let's read it. Colleges and universities are often talked about interchangeably, and while they are very similar educational institutions, there are a few key differences. College. A college is a post-secondary, by the way, is a word that means after high school. Primary education is grades 1 through 6, secondary is grades 7 through 12, and then post-secondary is college or university, or trade school, or apprenticeship, that kind of thing. A college is a post-secondary institution that usually provides only undergraduate education, as opposed to offering graduate programs as well. Again, let me define. Undergraduate means like a bachelor's degree. Graduate program means a master's degree or higher. This is not always the case, however. This is the typical distinction from a university. Colleges also tend to be smaller than universities and have smaller class sizes. Depending on the student, smaller class sizes may be a good reason to choose a college over a university, as they can provide more personal learning opportunities. Each individual college will vary depending on type and region, so additional research is necessary to find the best fit for you. University. Universities are post-secondary institutions that provide undergraduate and graduate programs. They will often have medical or law schools as well. Universities tend to be bigger than colleges with a more diverse curriculum because of the larger student body. Usually, universities divide up their different programs into schools like College of Engineering or College of Education, through which specific programs can be completed. Universities will often dedicate quite a bit of time and resources to research. Professors at universities typically are conducting this research while also teaching classes. It is common to have a TA, teaching assistant, who is also a graduate student, teaching smaller discussion-based classes, while the professor teaches several large lectures during the week. Most states have what are known as flagship universities. This refers to the main public college in the state, which is likely quite large, i.e. the University of Wisconsin-Madison, Ohio State University, University of Texas, etc. Here in Oklahoma, our flagship universities are OU and OSU. These universities typically draw students from both in-state and out-of-state, and often internationally as well. States will also have smaller public schools, usually drawing the majority of the student body from the region. In-state versus out-of-state universities and colleges can be a big financial determinant for where you go to school, as state schools tend to be less expensive for students who are currently residents of the state. Not all universities will operate in the same way. Additional research about each individual university is necessary to choose the best fit for you. Students who enjoy environments where there are lots of degree options and people will likely find value in a university education. Public versus private schools. What mainly determines a public versus private school, college or university, is how they are funded. Public colleges or universities are largely supported by state and some federal funding, in addition to student tuition. Private colleges or universities are supported by the student tuition, endowment, which is the total value of the institution's investments, and donations from alumni and other private donors. Public colleges or universities will often receive donations as well, but private colleges depend on those donations to operate. Because of this funding structure, private colleges tend to be more expensive than public colleges and universities, although this is not always the case. Because of the private contributions and endowments of private colleges, there often can be very good financial aid packages offered to students. Four-year institutions can differ greatly from school to school, and although students pursuing undergraduate degrees from these schools typically complete them in 4 years, it is important to note that not all students will spend just 4 years at the institution. Taking the time to compare and contrast different schools based on location, tuition, professors, class size, educational opportunities, major offerings, and more is essential to deciding which four-year school you should attend. Okay, so now we've read that. And we want to go back to our document and start our summary. So our summary, first we want to come up with a sentence that is describes the entire thing. The title is pretty good, Guide to Continuing Education After High School, Sorting Through Options. So what's one sentence that can sum up this entire article? I'd say this article compares colleges to universities and makes a distinction, or explains the distinction. How about that? Explains the distinction between public and private colleges and universities. Okay, that's a good start. Let's see. Colleges and universities. Changeably, let's see. Now these headings are a real boon to us. They give us a way to summarize pretty easily. So we're just going to go with this. I'm going to do underline for the... Okay, so colleges are the smaller of the two. And usually only offer undergraduate degrees. And associates is also an undergraduate. I would have liked in the article if they had mentioned what an undergraduate degree is, because the audience they're aiming at is high schoolers, is you guys, and not everybody knows what the phrase undergraduate degree means. I know I didn't when I was in high school. Usually only offer undergraduate degrees. They have smaller class sizes, fewer major offerings, and what else? Oh, and are usually cheaper to attend. I believe that was in there. Okay. Universities. Let's see. Universities are the larger of the two, and usually offer undergraduate and postgraduate degrees. Do you want that to be one word? You do want that to be one word. They can have larger classes, sometimes attended by a teacher's assistant, TA. This is a better way, by the way, to show somebody an abbreviation. In their version, they called it a TA first and then explained what the TA meant. The better way is to say the full thing out at first and then show it how it's abbreviated. They have larger class sizes, sometimes attended by a teacher's assistant to help the professor, and are more expensive than colleges. They have more major offerings. Now, if you remember from elsewhere, a major is the focus of your study. Like, are you studying being an airline pilot, or are you studying being a nurse, or are you studying being a teacher? Those are your majors. Okay, and then finally, section 3, private versus public. Okay, I'm going to go back and look at university. They did have the thing about the flagship university. And then there's a point about in-state versus out-of-state. Let's go and include that. Usually have flagship universities which have the state's name as their name, like University of Oklahoma, OU. Tuition is charged differently based on whether you live in that state or come from out of state. There we go. Private versus public. Supported by the state and some federal funding. Yeah. Okay. Oh, still underlining. Public schools are funded in large part by the government of their state and the federal U.S. God dang it. U.S. government. Funded in large part by the government of their state and the federal U.S. government. While private universities are funded by tuition, donations, and the endowment, a collection of investments. Okay. And then finally, to determine which type of which type of school you should go to, you should complete a lot of research. There. Now we've got a summary of the article that we can use for ourselves without having to reread the entire thing again. And it's in our words, so it's more accessible. And now if we go to write an essay, we can refer to this. And then we've got our citations right here. So as we write the article, we can come back to this. And then if we feel like we need a quote, we'll know sort of where in the article to look. Like if I want something about the flagships, I'll know to look under universities, somewhere in the middle. Let's look at, here we go, the flashcards. A signal phrase is a phrase inside your text that is introducing a quote. Instead of just firing off a quote and then explaining it afterwards, you put a signal phrase in, like, according to Parent Toolkit, or like Parent Toolkit says, and then you quote. Textual evidence is the evidence you give to support the point you're making. So you say something like, a college college is the better choice for me. And then use textual evidence is I need smaller class sizes, I don't have much money, um, I'm not looking for a doctorate, stuff like that. Explanatory informative essay is an essay whose goal is to explain and inform. Oop. With evidence and reasoning, yeah. So you're just trying to tell the audience about something that they might not know about. Argumentative essay, on the other hand, is meant to take a stance on something that could be disagreed about and convince the audience that your opinion is the correct opinion. Like if you were discussing the Marvel movies and you needed to say that Endgame was the best movie, you could argue that Endgame was the best movie. Narrative essay tells a story. So a story from your life or a story about somebody. It's got a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's got a character. It's got some instances of dialogue, and it's got descriptions to give an image in the reader's mind of something that they can use their imagination to see. And analysis is what comes after a quote. So you quote something and then you explain why you used that quote. Okay, so we'll call it quits on this particular lesson, and I'll join you again in section 1.3.